In the previous video, we went through the pretext of economies. In this video, we'll go through the actual details that you need to know for exam. All you need to know for exam are the different types of market structure, their general characteristics, and their advantages and disadvantages. I recommend you guys not to memorize them, but try to understand why they are the way they are, so that because you will get these type of questions in your paper number 2 essay questions. And in essay questions, if you simply spill everything you've mucked up, you don't tend to get good marks. So if you try to understand why and where they're coming from, you do have a lot of points, and you can analyze and evaluate in your essays, which can get you good marks. So market economies, their general characteristics is that firstly most of the economy is ruled by the private sector. Private sector has majority of control. When I say majority, I'm usually talking about like 70% control is by the private sector. Private sector means private individuals, businessmen, and people like that. Command economy is the opposite of market economy. So rationally, you could think of it, everything that happens in market economy doesn't happen in command economy, and everything that happens in command economy doesn't happen in market economy. Obviously, these are very theoretical extremes. In real life, it doesn't work that way. So in command economy, the public sector has most of the control. Public sector mainly means government. The government has 70 to 80% of the control. In market economy, public goods are not produced. Why are they not produced? We'll go through that later, but they are not produced due to the problems known as tragedy of commons. Okay, commons. In market economy, they are produced, so we don't have problem with public goods. Merit goods are underprovided in market economy, again because of information failure and tragedy of commons. Information So information failure, because of it, public merit goods are underprovided in market economy, and demerit goods are overprovided. In command economies, merit goods are provided the way they're supposed to be provided, and demerit goods are underprovided. Now, why is that? Because in market economy, the private sector has most of the control. As a result, the private sector's main ambition is to make profit. So it will always behave in a way that helps it, that allows it to make as high profit as possible. Profit is the main underlying fact of market economy. That's what people are trying to do in that type of economy. We don't have any completely market economy, but there's Singapore and America usually come close to a perfectly perfect market economy, but still they're not that perfect. They're also mixed in many ways. Command economy, the main purpose, because it's controlled by government sector, the main purpose is to provide the most vulnerable. The most vulnerable, I hope my spelling is correct. The most vulnerable in society are supposed to be provided. Now, of course, this is theoretical. In real life, in market economies, the closest that we can think of is North Korea, and the closest we can think of is China. China is not that, it's not that type of market. It's a different type of economy. The closest you can think of is North Korea, and perhaps maybe China. China is very different in terms of its market structure than other economies. The government is supposed to provide for the most vulnerable in the society and keep them as priority, and the government is supposed to take responsibility of the entire economy. Obviously, in real life, it's not like that. First of all, in real life, the governments don't really know what people actually want. There's a great deal of information failure and government failure from that part, and also there tends to be lots of corruption in command economy. Again, these are theoretical extremes, so take them as theoretical extremes. Don't take them as something that is happening in real life. In real life, what happens is a mixed economy where you have some elements of market economy and you have some elements of mixed command economy. The idea of mixed economy was not brought up by King Keynes, but he was the one who tried to reconcile between the two parties and tried to come up with a different technique that helps us solve the problem. Keynes said that in markets should be free in most cases. However, sometimes you need government intervention. Sometimes you need governments to step in and take control. One of the situations he suggested would be when you are in a deep recession, such as the Great Depression, which he was going through, which he was trying to solve in his time period. In other cases, when it comes to when it comes to legal laws and stuff, when it comes to other scenarios where you need the government to step in sometimes. But his major contribution was that he tried to come up, to reconcile and come up with a different way of how to run economies. He has a whole school named after him. We in modern economists call it the the Keynes school of thought, or the neoclassic school of thought. So mixed economy has elements of both of them. So that's the first thing you have to know in your book: general characteristics of market economy, general characteristics of public command economy, and what is a mixed economy. They have elements of both. Some of it is ruled by private, some of it is ruled by government. The general idea is that you keep it private and the government intervenes when it has to intervene in certain market failure situation. And what is market failure? We'll get through later on. So government intervene, the market is not free always, and when there is market failure, the government intervenes. Failure. Okay, so these are in mixed economies, it's mostly free, but sometimes in certain natural disasters, or when things become extremely difficult through a sudden change, governments need to step in. Now, after knowing the general characteristics of different types of economies, you need to know the advantages and disadvantages of each. I don't want to come up with a list of advantage and disadvantage. I want you guys to think of them yourself. I'll give you hints and I want you to think of them yourself. The reason is that if you think of them yourself, it's easier to develop in the exam. It's easier to develop analysis in the exam and evaluate them. Think about market economies. Market economies, the main idea is that everything is free. Everything is, by free I mean everything is owned by the private sector. Think of what can happen as a result. The first thing that comes to my mind is when things are owned by the private individuals, it can lead to inequality. The reason is that if the private individuals own most of the economy, those that are rich and those that are in the higher spectrum, in the higher socioeconomic spectrum, they will tend to become richer, they'll tend to become more wealthier, and those that are poor will not be able to amass as much wealth, and they'll get even poorer. So there will be inequality in a market economy. Now in your exam, don't just write there will be inequality. Think of it, develop your ideas, try to paint a picture so that the examiner understands that you understand what you're talking about. The second problem, what else can occur in a market economy? Think of it this way: public goods are not provided at all. Why? Because there's a tragedy of common, because people don't want to spend money on something that they think that someone else will spend. What are public goods? We'll get to it later on. But general idea is that public goods are not provided. As a result, infrastructure is underdeveloped. Roads, bridges, water pipeline, things like that. The basic necessities, the basic structure that you need to make a community, they tend not to be there in market economy, simply because public goods are not provided. Merit goods are underprovided. So you can think of it this way: you can have exploitation. Let's put it this way: exploitation. Because merit goods are underprovided and demerit goods are overprovided, there could be different forms of exploitation. For example, you're exploiting children by giving them food which contains a lot of sugar. We would label them demerit goods. Because it's a free market and government has very little control over what people can produce or not produce, children can be exploited into doing things that are not good for them. And merit goods could be underprovided too. These are simple 3 hints that you can think of, and if you try to develop them properly, you can get easily 6 marks from them. I recommend you guys not to come up with a 5 to 6 point list of advantage and disadvantage. but try to come up with few, 3 or 4, but try to come up with them in a developed format so that when you explain, you can explain them properly. These type of questions you do get in your essays, so you don't just memorizing bunch of different points will not benefit you. You need to know why and where they're coming from. So these are 3 disadvantages of market economy. Of course, anything which is disadvantage in market economy turns out to be advantage in a command economy. Inequality doesn't exist theoretically in market economies because obviously the government theoretically takes care of the vulnerable, takes care of the poor, and therefore the society is balanced theoretically. Infrastructure is provided because public goods are made, and there is no exploitation of goods. There is no exploitation of goods because demand goods and merit goods are not over or under provided. They are provided sufficiently. So so these are the advantages of market command economy. So whatever is the disadvantage of market economy becomes the advantage of command economy because they're opposites of each other. So what could be the disadvantage, the advantage of market economy? The first advantage, can you think of any advantage? The first advantage that comes up into your mind: individuals are free. The private firms own most of the things. So the first thing you can think of is freedom. You have freedom. You can do whatever you want. In command economies, you can't have freedom, and freedom has a sense of happiness. So people tend to be more free, and the logic is that they tend to be more happy in market economy compared to command economy. The second thing you can have is mobility. You can move around. Mobility. You can move around easily, right? Because government doesn't control much and people control most of it, so you are able to move around. You are able to do whatever you want in terms of what you can or cannot do. And you can think of other advantages too. The third advantage is that there's efficiency, and there's effectiveness. Because in market economy, the profit is the main name of the game, and people try to make as much profit as possible. Theoretically speaking, they tend to be more efficient. They try to make the process as cost effective as possible. They try to make the process as quality effective as possible. In command economies, you don't have this because only governments can produce. Theoretically, they tend to be inefficient. They don't really care about whether profit is being made or not. As long as they're able to produce it, they'll be happy with it. So efficiency and effectiveness is one of the advantages of market economy and a disadvantage of command economy. What else can be advantage of a market economy? One disadvantage I forgot to mention is market failure. Right? Market failure in a way is exploitation, but market failure is when market is not able to work properly, and that can happen in market economy. It doesn't happen in command economy, theoretically speaking. Again, all of this is simple theoretical substances. Over here you have 3 points on each side. The advantage of market economy, you can make it disadvantage of command, and disadvantage of market, you can make them advantage of command. All you have to do in your exam is try to develop them logically, with reason, and try to explain them properly. Don't memorize bunch of points and just write them down. Try to understand where they're coming from. If you're able to explain them properly, you can get 3 marks for each point easily, such as inequality. So you could write sentence number 1: market economies are controlled by private individuals for the most part. As a result, those that are rich can attain more wealth, and those that are poor cannot attain as much. As a result, you could have high income inequality developing. So I have a simple point and I try to develop 3 sentences, and I can get 2 marks for them easily. So try to have fewer points but more developed points. As for mixed economies varies a lot. We don't have general description of what mixed economy looks like. They vary tremendously. So we can't have a general description of what a mixed economy looks like. So you will not be asked about, if you are asked about the general description of mixed economy, try to give a generic answer of, some elements from here, some elements from there. Governments can intervene sometime. What I usually write when it comes to mixed economy, I usually say, look, in mixed economies, majority of the ownership is private market or free market, or the market system. The free market is they own. The free market is the way the things are done. However, in certain situation, the government steps in. So free markets, you can define them as mixed markets, you can define them as free markets except in certain situations. What are those situations? When there's extreme inequality, when you don't have proper infrastructure, when you have market failure. So free markets except in certain situations. That's how I describe mixed markets, and that's simple and clear enough for your examiners to understand what you're trying to talk about. Hopefully this was helpful. In the next video we'll go through the transition mechanism, what happens when economy transits from command to market or from market to command.